are we ready?
We are, yes.
Great. Just get streaming here too.
Right, do I need to, okay, I see it.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our July 8th COVID-19 update for the city of Burlington. And we are excited to have with us on today's briefing a important new member of the Burlington community. Welcome to Burlington, Dr. Akande. We are so excited for your stepping into this critical role for the community, and so saddened that that it's happening under the current circumstances. But in our conversation so far, I know you're the right leader for a moment like this. So welcome, and thank you for joining us on the briefing today.
Mayor, thank you for having me. It's good to be in Burlington. It's wonderful to be in Champlain College. You know, this is it's a remarkable community, and I'm looking forward to being an engaged and active citizen of this beautiful state and beautiful community. You know, it started really well. I remember when I was announced. Shortly after that, we had a conversation, and you know, the connectivity that occurred and the conversation we talked about collaboration and enabling this community to serve those in need. And I'm really impressed, Mayor, how quick you can move conversations to fruition. That's pretty impressive, and that's why we're here today to make a special announcement.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership, and really the heavy lifting for today's announcement has a lot of it at least has been done by Champlain College. Before we move to that announcement, let me just, I just want to properly introduce you on this webinar. Dr. Akande, after an extensive, really impressive process, was appointed to be the president of Champlain College and assumed the presidency on July 1. And he has just located here from St. Louis with his family. And in St. Louis, he served as the assistant vice chancellor of international programs for Africa at Washington University in St. Louis. Really one of the great institutions of higher education in the country. My college roommate's a professor out there, and I think as a Vermonter, I might not have known what a great institution that was if he hadn't had that experience. So we're, just a great background. Dr. Akande served as the president of Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, and the dean of the George Herbert Walker School of Business and Technology at Webster University, also in St. Louis. He's an economist. He's got business experience. He's got higher education experience, really brings all of those different perspectives and tools into this new job at Champlain College. And I appreciate, how you just said it, Dr. Akande, that you're excited to become active member of this community. Burlington has really been very fortunate for a long time now to have had leaders at Champlain College that understood that both institutions, the city and the college, really benefit from a close working relationship between the college and the city. And Champlain College has been just remarkably committed to that for a long period of time. And I can tell that you understand that we have a mutual success and are committed to it. And I got that immediately from our conversations. And yes, congratulations again. Welcome. Look forward to actually being able to see you in person. We are neighbors, Dr. Akande. We've got to make that happen sometime.
Mayor, thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you for that remarkable introduction. It is my wife and I both are really excited to be here, and we're looking forward to the day where we can step out of the house and begin to engage the community. And it's so far it's been remarkable. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right, so we have an announcement to make. So let's move to that. This is an exciting one that we are hopeful will positively impact the lives of many Burlingtonians. We know that we are living in a moment of unprecedented, sudden economic disruption. We know that there are thousands of people in Burlington who are suddenly out of work or who face really uncertain near-term employment prospects because of this recession that we find ourselves in out of the blue. This isn't something that anyone was expecting until it hit us in March. I've heard many people say to me in recent months that they are sort of evaluating their life. They're thinking about new opportunities. They're thinking about how to use this unexpected period of being out of work to grow professionally, to take on new challenges, pursue new opportunities. And what we're announcing today is an opportunity for exactly that. We are calling this the City of Burlington Champlain College Local Skill Accelerator Program. And what this is through a partnership between the city and Champlain College, Burlington residents can now sign up and need to sign up quickly because this is happening in real time for reduced tuition in online undergraduate certificate programs. And ultimately, for people who want to go beyond a certificate program to a full undergraduate degree, this discount can apply there as well. This basically, if we could just go back, Olivia, so essentially what Champlain College is doing here is opening up preferred pricing for online programs. And these are very well respected online programs, consistently receiving high marks from a variety of independent organizations. This is something that City of Burlington employees have had available to them for some time as sort of an employee benefit. Champlain College has found a way to offer this discounted pricing to any Burlingtonian who is interested in pursuing a certificate or an undergraduate degree at this time. Now we can advance, Olivia. So again, yes, U.S. News and World Report has consistently rated these programs very highly. These are career-focused certificate programs that allow students to build skills in emerging fields like information technology, cybersecurity, and human resources in 6 to 9 months. You can go to Champlain College, participate in these online courses and emerge with these marketable new skills. The city is helping get this implemented, putting some of our emergency dollars into helping get this off the ground. The way you access this and get more details and actually sign up, and there is a deadline at the end of this month for fall classes. You go to online.champlain.edu/BTV. That's online.champlain.edu/BTV, as you can see there on the screen. Dr. Conde, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for what you and your team have done to make this opportunity possible to Burlingtonians. I welcome any thoughts you have on it.
You know, Mayor, thank you. I want to give a shout out to my teammates at Champlain, Melissa Marcello and Joanna and the entire team, Catherine, and even our interim president, Laurie Quinn. I mean, they've worked really hard to make this thing happen and to do it in real time. Also, a big shout out to Brian Lowe. Brian has been a remarkable partner to ensure that we can get this thing rolling quickly. That the level of urgency that we saw in bringing this into fruition was pretty impressive because, you know, Mayor, we're in the midst of uncertain times. And what this collaboration does is it takes deliberate steps to create certainty for the future of Burlingtonians that are that have been upended by this pandemic and consequent recession. And so our goal is essentially to be able to provide the kind of pivot opportunity that will allow individuals that have been furloughed or laid off to be able to move into different areas, to strengthen their skill sets, and to be competitively attractive in the marketplace. It's these kinds of programs that help sustain communities like this, like Burlington. And we feel very good about this. But more importantly, you had indicated that this is a program that has a long history of offering certificates and degree programs that are developed in partnership with employers, and with the emerging and next generation needs in mind. In the critical times that we find ourselves, we recognize that these kinds of programs, which are sort of market ready, relevant programs, will enable our citizens to be able to transition from unemployment to the realm of being employed again. And I want to commend you. I want to thank you for working with us on this. And I'm hopeful that this is just one of the many initiatives that we're going to be doing together in the very near future.
Excellent. Me too. Again, I think both institutions have benefited so greatly from joint efforts. I look forward to future collaborations. I want to share your thanks to the team that worked on making this possible. And just to emphasize, what you just said, Champlain's success in recent decades has so much been a function, from my perspective, of understanding what emerging industries were, where the jobs of the future were going to be, and creating programs that serve those needs. It's really been very impressive. The percentage of Champlain students who graduate from your programs and immediately get jobs here in Vermont, here in Chittenden County, is stunning. And I do hope anyone who, either by design or by misfortune related to this recession, finds themselves needing to kind of plot out their next move. This is an opportunity I hope people will consider, and that this discount of, and I think it's important to say that these programs were already discounted a couple of years ago, as I understand it, by the cost of about 50%. So there was a big push Champlain made to make these online courses affordable within the last couple of years. And what we're announcing today is a further discount of another almost approaching 20% to make this even more in reach. And I think it's important to point out that beyond that, some students may qualify for additional financial aid opportunities. Brian and Melissa, thank you. You're leaders on this team that put this together. Are there any additional thoughts you'd like to share?
I'll say one or two, and I might, Melissa, if you want to speak to some of the specifics of the undergrad certificate programs and how that can be flexible and helpful for folks, I'd appreciate that. I think if I were a resident hearing about this, I would also want to know, just Champlain is exceptional in many ways. Like, you don't need an ACT, you don't need an SAT to apply into these programs. You need to apply, but there are not huge barriers to entry here. And as the mayor was alluding to, if you have a GED or a high school transcript, you are also likely eligible for some financial assistance from the federal government. So there are all kinds of different streams here that could be helpful to making this kind of participation possible. I think it's amazing that the college is already discounted by half. I think it's great that they're coming down even further. And the other thing that I just want to emphasize is, if you complete an undergraduate certificate program and want to continue, the college is also offering that kind of continued preferred discount to the applicant. Say you complete your undergraduate certificate program and you realize that the full degree could be quite helpful to you. Kind of remarkably, from my perspective, the college is continuing to offer that discount to any Burlington resident who applies into these programs successfully. Melissa, I'm happy to turn it over to you to talk to some of the specifics about these undergraduate certificate programs, or I can speak to it if you want.
I'll take the opportunity. So thank you for having us, and thank you for Dr. Akande for helping to shepherd this from St. Louis, because we spent many hours on the phone with Brian and others at the college to make sure this could happen at this time. So we believe in working adults at Champlain College Online. I mean, that is who our programs are designed for. So they're designed to get our folks in the workforce or to accelerate their careers in the workforce. And we know now is a really tough time for folks. And the people that I talk to on a near daily basis, I talked to a couple applicants yesterday for other programs, are concerned about making a big financial commitment at a time that is uncertain. But they believe in work too. And so, you know, folks want to be able to reskill quickly, whether they're in a current situation and their employer says, here are the jobs are in blockchain, or the jobs are in data science. We have pathways for folks to get into those jobs in 6 to 9 months. And through this program with the city of Burlington, we're talking about less than $5,000, much of which probably could be funded through federal financial aid, or perhaps Pell eligible grants if folks are eligible for that. So, you know, we see this as a great opportunity for folks to take this time to reflect, and we work really well with folks' schedules because you don't have to be in class at a set time. Our classes are 100% online. Our students are engaging in our programs, whether it's through their smartphone, you know, while they're, you know, dropping kids at camp, if you're lucky enough to have kids able to go to camp these days, or, you know, other parts of their lives, they're able to make these programs work. And then, as you said, both Mayor and Brian, students who complete these certificates are then eligible to move on to a Champlain 100% online bachelor's degree at that preferred pricing. Because what we find at Champlain is that when students are in the habit of getting in classes, they get great momentum and feel success because they're doing things in the classrooms that they're able to apply on the job, and they don't want to stop. So we don't want cost to be a barrier for them completing that career-changing bachelor's degree too. So I would just recommend folks go to online.champlain.edu/BTV, learn about the program, give us a call, or, you know, put your information into the website, and we will be happy to start a conversation with you. But you're right, Brian, we are looking at people who have grit, resilience, and really are excited about jumpstarting their education now at Champlain College. We want to make sure that our education is accessible.
And, you know, Mayor, one of the things that attracted me to Champlain College early is just their commitment to accessibility and affordability. And I think as we go through this very difficult time economically, we're anchoring our strategy on that very important, those two important elements, because there's so many of our citizens that are facing some significant challenges now. And I just want to applaud you for taking the strategic step to address this issue for literally hundreds of Burlingtonians that find themselves in these difficult times, because it's an investment that will pay off. You're getting them back to work, getting them engaged in the economy. It's just the ultimate gift that you can give at this time. So it's very exciting.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Dr. Akande, for your engaging this. Let's hope this is something that many Burlingtonians do take advantage of. I would love to have you back on a future briefing to talk about the hundreds that have signed up and have helped, that this has played a role in getting the community at a community level and for many individuals and households in this community, really give some meaning to the idea that we can come through this challenging period stronger than ever and able to bounce back. So thank you. Look forward to our next conversation on getting ready for the fall and the return of in-person classes, and look forward to working with you on so many other critical issues in the months and years ahead. Welcome. I hope you and your family get settled here as easily as possible under these circumstances, and I look forward to seeing you around the neighborhood soon.
Thank you, Mayor. My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, Melissa. Brian's going to stick around here for the next part of this briefing today. People who've been watching these briefings regularly know that Brian Lowe, who's our Chief Innovation Officer, has played a really large role in the city's response to the coronavirus in a whole host of ways. Been a real leader in the Plan for the People program and our community masking initiative, and is the head of what we've called our analytics team that we set up very early on in this pandemic to help the city stay abreast of the latest information and thinking in this pandemic, and put that to work. And basically for the next few minutes here, I just wanted to kind of share with you all, share with the media, the way in which we are in the city of Burlington, kind of assessing the current state of the pandemic, and how we're thinking about the virus, containing the virus from here, and give some sense of what people can expect from the city in the weeks and months ahead as virus levels we expect rise and fall to a certain degree here in the community. And I thought having Brian for this conversation, given the role he's played in the city response, the two of us could kind of have a conversation here, and then we'll open this up for questions after. I think we have one other quick announcement we want to do, and then we'll open up for questions. So, I know one of the reasons I want to have this conversation today is I know there's a lot of anxiety about the current state of the country's response to the virus. What we're seeing across the country is frankly a national embarrassment. If you compare how the U.S. is doing right now with many of our peer nations around the world, it's just a terrible story. We are seeing a new spike in cases nationally, while other countries, continue an extended period of virus suppression. I do think it's important, sadly, we don't really have a national response. We have a patchwork response. We have each community and state left to fend for themselves to a certain degree by design under this federal administration. As we wake up today on July 8th, as we assess the situation on July 8th, I am, relieved to say that after a couple of real tests over the last month, a little more than a month, the state of virus transmission within Vermont remains very good. We continue to be an outlier as a state and as a region in terms of our experience with the virus right now. And that's what that map is showing you. That map is from the COVID Act Now website that we've talked about many times in the past on these briefings, often with Dr. Leffler of UEM Medical Center. What that map, this is a map generated by a team of data scientists and academics, and what the green on that map means is that we are trending in a way to be on track to control the virus. Yellow states have a limited amount of community transmission. Last week, Vermont was yellow. We went through a period where we went from green to yellow. Now we're back to green again, one of just 4 states in the whole country that is currently green. Yesterday, there were just 2 states in the country that were green. The drivers of this are really the numbers of new infections, the percentage of positive tests, and there's an assessment of the capacity of intensive care units that are available. On all those metrics, Vermont is doing very well right now. The fact that trajectory that we were just on, that I just described, of being green and then yellow and then green again, I think is an indication that we are succeeding right now with this box-it-in virus suppression strategy we've talked about frequently on this briefing. These are the interrelated strategies of testing. When we find a positive test, following up with all of the close contacts of that individual through what we call contact tracing, so testing, tracing, isolation strategies. People, once they do test positive, going into isolation, staying in isolation and not infecting others, and then quarantine strategies, where which quarantine is a term again for people who have not yet tested positive, maybe never test positive, but there's some reason to be concerned they might be carrying the virus, either because they've traveled here recently from a higher risk area, or because they have had close contact with someone with the virus that we are aware of. Those strategies, we saw it happen, and Brian, maybe you can speak a little bit about it, because it was really a big part of your responsibilities for a couple weeks there was supporting the state. The state is the lead really on testing, tracing, and isolation. But the city's been able to provide some supportive efforts on those three strategies. And really, I think we've pioneered, we've pioneered to a certain degree what supportive quarantine looks like. And the city's taken on some lead responsibilities there. We met these tests with June 1, people coming back, a lot of students coming back from out of state to Burlington, relocating here, having to go into quarantine or under orders to go into quarantine. And we also saw this outbreak in the old north end of Burlington and Winooski that resulted in our biggest spike of new cases, new positives since March and April, but that has calmed down now. Maybe Brian, why don't you just, from your perspective, talk about the status of those two efforts, and anything you want to add to kind of that narrative there of what we've experienced over the last month.
Absolutely, Mayor. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. I think it's absolutely a team effort within the city. A lot of people contributing, both on the analytics team, through the RRC, and through the different city departments to try and help keep us where we are and improve in any way we can. The experience of the last month or so has been that there are, I think, really important ways the city can supplement the great effort the state makes across those domains you laid out: the testing, tracing, isolating, and quarantine. The city is well positioned to help the state identify and gain access to properties. If we're oriented to move quickly, we can help secure that property access very quickly. The city and personnel within the city are very well positioned to help elevate the voices of some of our community partners and make sure that they're heard, understood, and that the information they may have about risk or transmission risk or compliance risk is kind of quickly elevated to VDH and to help kind of keep our community in a safe posture. I think that what you said there about something you said and something Dr. Akande said. You talked about how we were yellow recently, we're back to green. I think that underscores that it's a situation where we need to maintain focus. And I appreciate, in the same way Dr. Akande said it, I liked his word. I think you kind of, in the same way you pushed us with urgency to work with Champlain, I feel that same kind of push when it comes to how the city needs to be responding to issues we identify or issues we see or requests that VDH has. And so I think that, in that way of making sure we get information quickly to where it needs to go, making sure we elevate the voices of our community partners, making sure that we're supplementing the testing and tracing strategies with insights about how tracing could be improved or access to property is really important. When it comes to supportive quarantine, I know you can speak more about this in May, in the future speak more about it, so I won't go into too much detail unless you want. But I think that's a really innovative program. I think Zach Williamson, Luke McGowan, the mayor's office team, others have really done a nice job here of helping make it so that if you are asked to isolate or you are asked to quarantine, you have access to certain resources that make that easier, and incentives to stay quarantined. I think that's a really important program to help increase compliance with what is a really critical strategy going forward. And I know the city is also stepping in a variety of ways to try and support other efforts by our community partners to make sure that people have access to food, access to resources they might need. So
Great. So yeah, I think we should have Zach back and you, and let's sometime soon kind of go through the supportive quarantine perhaps in more detail. I do think it's just worth updating. People have been following this. We've had more than 200 people now go through the supportive quarantine, either complete and kind of graduate from the supportive quarantine program because they test negative and are done. We still have some dozens of people that are actively in quarantine currently. This program is continuing at this point. We're not, our plan is to continue it indefinitely right now because we have gotten some survey results back, and those surveys show that the great majority, more than 80% of the people who participate in the program say that the program helped them comply with the governor's quarantine orders while they were during this period. And a large majority also appear to have either had full compliance or a high level of compliance. So we think this is a tool to keep the Vermont green like that. We are in conversations with the state about kind of moving out of this pilot phase into making this a more kind of an ongoing committed element of the region's virus response. And so we'll have, I expect some updates on that front going forward. Let's go to the next slide, Olivia, and just to Brian's point that like we want to give this update first. There have the last couple of days, I haven't seen today's new numbers, and they're probably out by now. I just haven't seen it, but we had only one new positive yesterday, one new positive the day before, but there have been enough new positives in recent days that in communications with the state, they agreed to another week of very substantial amounts of testing here in the Burlington area. Those are recently released dates and times and locations. You want to add anything about this, Brian? I mean, I know this is another area where the city and other partners help. I know the Burlington Housing Authority has helped create some opportunities here. Anything else you want to say about these testing opportunities?
I think they're an important piece of the puzzle. I think it's something that you've advocated for pretty strongly for the continued need for these and the initial need for these. I really appreciate our VDH partners, the Department of Health partners, establishing these. They're not easy to stand up these kind of pop-up testing sites and then maintain them over multiple weeks so far through the summer. They've also rotated them around the community. They've been in the New North End, the South End, the Old North End, downtown. So they are really making an effort to try and make testing more accessible. And it is a really important thing that in a dense part of the state we have continued easy access to testing.
So I think it's important for people to see that you can either register ahead of time, and there's a link there on the screen if you can make it out for registering, and you can also find that by just going to the city's a really useful part of the city webpage right now. If you're ever looking for testing, right on the resource and recovery kind of landing page, there's a box that sort of calls out testing opportunities. You click on that, and that takes you to registration opportunities. Walk-ins are also welcome. And the times I've been on sites, there have not been long waits. People are able to get in, get tested, and get out quite quickly, quite conveniently, and I encourage people to continue to use this opportunity in the week ahead. Let's advance to the next slide, Olivia. So one of the reasons we want to have this conversation today is we know, and I think a lot of this is driven by what we're seeing around the country and concern that the new spikes we're seeing in the South, the West, could be back here soon, and that certainly is a risk. And I share the concern. I understand why people are worried about this and reaching out to the city about it. We have had a lot of people calling or writing about concerns about the beaches and activity happening at the beaches. And and I just want to kind of use this example to just sort of be as transparent as we can about how the city is trying to organize its response and focus its decide where to put education and enforcement, and other kind of virus response efforts. We agree with, and we are aware that there was disrespectful behavior happening at the beaches, the holiday weekend, and to some degree in the weekends leading up to this. That includes both behaviors as well as trash being left behind, and then there being some sense that people weren't taking care of this great public resource. And I'm not happy about that, and the Parks Department is aware of the situation and working on a response so that we don't see a repeat of this in the upcoming weekends. As far as, however, I want to make a distinction between just sort of bad behavior that is not consistent with an amenity that we want to be appealing to all Burlingtonians, including families and younger Burlingtonians. I want to make a distinction between that and concerns about public health and virus transmission. And here, some of the feedback we get is out of a sense that there's just too many people at the beaches and this is a risk. I understand that concern, and there was a lot of discussion of that concern early on, as we've been figuring out as we've been figuring this virus out, and what behaviors are truly risky and which aren't. At this point, as we move into mid-July, the science continues to build that outdoor spaces, including beaches, are low risk areas. They are much lower risk than confined indoor spaces. So to a certain degree, people are needing to make choices about where they're going to spend their time, how they're going to recreate, how they're going to deal with the extreme heat we've seen already this summer and that we're expecting again over the next couple of days. The city is supportive of people going to the beaches. We want people to be mindful of other households, to avoid sustained close contact with other households. I think people should also be aware of the science, aware of the fact that there's no documented cases of sort of strangers passing each other, even without masks, like on the bike path or something, and transmitting the virus. And, study after study showing that very few of these very few infections seem to be coming from outdoor activity. And so, Brian, you want to add anything to that, and thoughts about how you're thinking about beaches, and maybe talk about the comparison between beaches and other kind of settings like bars?
Okay, no, I'm happy to do that. I think I'll answer it in two parts. I think it's important to share, like, a lot of this research and reading, like, this comes from within the city context. It comes from this analytics team that we established early on in the crisis to really devour as much of the literature and research as we could, as quickly as we could, to make sure that we were informing the mayor and the broader city team about how the collective understanding of this risk was evolving. And I think the way the mayor's framed it, and that kind of contrast between beaches and bars, is really important. As we understand better, and obviously there's lots more to learn, but as we understand better where the risk lies, if you are outside in the sunlight with good airflow and you're keeping space between yourself and other people, and practicing good hygiene, that is a much less risky scenario than, by contrast, if you are in a closed space for an extended period with close contact, maybe where there's loud music and alcohol, where you have to talk louder, and you're not wearing a mask. Like, those are really different scenarios. And we know that the kind of 3 C's that the mayor and the city have been advocating for, the kind of close contact over an extended period of time, that is kind of a bar setting. And if we are in a riskier situation in Vermont, that would be a situation that you probably want to avoid, or at least very much limit your risk and exposure to. But I think those beaches, for all those reasons, are much safer if you practice good distancing and hygiene.
And I think let's combine these sort of 2 elements of the conversation here too. Particularly at a moment when Vermont is in the green on that COVID Act now, when basically there is very low levels of community transmission. when that is the status of the virus in the community, I think you know, the city having the posture it currently has of the beaches being open is going to continue. If we get back into a yellow or orange situation, and we'll talk more about that kind of risk assessment in a moment, then on a whole number of areas, you might see the city we are considering and weighing and planning to take further action in certain areas if the virus transmission risk changes. But given where we are now, that's why the beaches will continue to be open during this period. That combination of low levels of virus transmission with what we know now about the relative safety of this setting. There were more bullets here, Olivia? Okay, so we wanted, in contrast, we have real concerns as we voiced last week about activity in bars. I want to share with this group that, I appreciate some of the responses I've gotten since our announcements and statements last week. I've had bar managers get in touch directly with the mayor's office, share their efforts to comply. Just today, the governor has taken an important step and is sending a letter to bar owners, being clearer than ever about what the regulations are for bars, adding some additional rules and making it very clear that going forward, the DLC, the Liquor Control Commission, would be conducting compliance checks with COVID-19 regulations and the enforcement actions for operations that are not complying with these challenging regulations. They are not easy regulations to succeed with and to operate with for any bar. They require bars to operate in very different ways than they would in normal times. But bars that want to stay open are going to need to do that, and the governor is committing to new compliance and compliance checks with that. And I want to just be clear: the city fully supports the governor taking this new posture. We say that while really, I want to be clear: these are important businesses for Burlington. They've been an important part of Burlington's economic success. They're part of the vibrancy of Burlington. I take no joy in at all in having to have this tougher posture, but this is an area that we know has all three of the C's. It has when people are indoors, those are closed spaces, close contact, as Brian described, and there can be significant crowds. So I think with that, why don't we go to the last slide on this, Olivia, and just wanted to share with the press and the public that this, a little bit more on this idea of risk alerts. The Resolve to Save Lives organization, which is also the national public health organization that came out with, really were leaders on the articulating and communicating the box it in strategy. An additional recommendation that they're making for communities now is to consider coming out with risk alert levels for states, for regions. And we have been in discussion with the state for some time about the possibility of bringing these risk alert levels, or a risk dial, sometimes you hear it referred to, here to Chittenden County, to the Burlington area. And the way to think of this is a little bit like the risk alert levels that we've all seen for decades around forest fires. The idea is that the risk alert level would change as virus levels and virus trends change in the community. In a sense, at these briefings, we've been working under a risk dial kind of awareness, with frequently looking at the COVID Act Now website. That, however, is a national model. We are interested in the possibility of tailoring some kind of local risk dial, or at least statewide risk dial. And the value of this is that, my sense is right now, all of us, as we go through our daily lives, are making risk assessments all the time about what activities we think are safe for us, for our family members. And this would be a tool to help you make those assessments. It would be a tool that people could, you can evaluate whether or not you wanted to be, going to an outdoor dining opportunity or not. It could be a tool to evaluating how comfortable you are making certain types of appointments. It also could be a tool that could guide additional regulatory steps, additional steps that local government might take as we go up the risk ladder. And again, going back to the beaches, or to use another one, we get a lot of concerns right now about people not wearing face masks outdoors. It is a requirement, of course, that people, if they're going inside to retailers, and right now, Burlington requires you to wear a mask indoors. Outdoors, there's a lot more kind of debate about it and less clarity. Given what we know about outdoor transmission right now, I think, it is not something I have a huge, I don't know, Brian, you want to jump in here? I mean, do you want to say something?
Well, I think if you're going to be in close proximity to people, if you're going to be, in an area where there are a lot of people circulating, I think it's not a bad idea to have a face mask. But I think, to your point of kind of incidental people passing, 6 feet apart very quickly, that transmission risk is probably fairly low. And if we're focused from limited city resources of where we can apply the kind of highest and best use, we probably should be focused on compliance indoors.
Right. However, if we were to reach the higher alert levels, that posture might change. So, good. Anything else you want to add, Brian? Or we might, I think we want to hit one more non-virus item, and then we'll take some questions.
Well, just briefly, I just did want to thank David White, Megan Tuttle, Carolyn Felix, Blaine Antasea, Kayla Donahue, Jesse Friedman, and Nancy Stetson, who've been doing just a tremendous amount of work on the city analytics team, trying to make sure we're tracking different parts of the country and understanding lessons learned from the experiences, both good and bad, that other municipalities have had dealing with the virus here. So thank you, Mayor.
Great. Okay, one last item, and I think we have Catherine Shad, our Chief Administrative Officer, here to help on this one. Catherine, welcome. I'm not sure if we've had you on the briefing before, or maybe not recently. Maybe you were here to talk about our property tax deferment program a few weeks back. Welcome back. Can you speak to what's going on with the August property tax bills?
I would love to. Thank you, Mayor. I am going to start with the headline, and then I will give a little bit of background. Many taxpayers are probably anxiously awaiting their property tax bills, because you usually see them in mid-July because they are due in mid-August. This year, you will not be receiving it until August, because we are planning to move the due date from August 12th to September 14th. And I'll explain a little bit about how we're going to do that and why we're going to do that. A quick primer, a little review about property taxes, since I think most of us probably don't like to spend too much time thinking about them. They are made up of two basic components: the municipal portion of our tax bill, as well as the education portion. We rely on the state of Vermont to give us the education tax rate. They also help process some important adjustments that usually help to lower tax bills for some of our taxpayers. And we can't produce the property tax bills without that important information from the state. Due to the COVID pandemic, I think everyone knows the state of Vermont extended the income tax filing deadline until July 15th, in line with the IRS. So because of that delay, the Department of Taxes let us know that there were going to be some delays on their end. Initially, they thought the education tax rate would be really delayed. They worked very hard and they were able to get that to us just a few days ago. So that was only about a week late. However, they are about a month behind on processing those adjustments I mentioned. And so we are still waiting for about 25% of both the homestead declarations as well as other property tax adjustment claims to be processed. Those will not be ready from the state until August 1st. And estimating about 25% of them won't be ready. That would affect approximately 1,000 of our taxpayers. So if we were to send out a bill now, it would either be inaccurate or incomplete. So because of that, the clerk treasurer's office and the city assessor's office is recommending to city council at the meeting next Monday that we postpone that first installment, as I mentioned, from being due August 12th to due September 14th. Why the 14th? Because September 12th is a Saturday, so you get a couple of extra days. That will be with no penalty, and that will also include the taxpayers who applied for relief from their June payment. So we will not be needing any payments in August. All of those will be due in September. So you can expect your complete and accurate tax bill mailed to you. You should receive it just about a month late in mid-August. Now, what does this mean for you? If you are someone who has their property taxes directly debited from the city debit program, we initiate that and there's nothing that you need to do. Also, if you pay your property taxes through an escrow service, we have let all of them know about the timing change and they are handling that. So again, it should not pose any problems. No action is necessary from any taxpayers. One case where action may be necessary is if you have direct debit set up with your own financial institution, and that is something that you initiate, usually in August. You should be in touch with your bank and postpone that payment. And I think that's about it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent, Catherine. Thank you. That was very clear and really, I think, lays out what could be a confusing situation. And let's see if there are any more questions about that or any of the other topics we touched on today. We got Erin here in the studio. Any questions from you there?
Yeah, we do. I don't think we've spoken with you since the budget passed. We wanted to just kind of revisit that.
Okay.
And it passed. So what comes next for Burlington?
Great. In case there's trouble hearing, Erin's question is about the budget for FY21 that passed late on Tuesday night a week ago, and basically the question is, I think, any reaction or reflections on that and what comes next. So I'm certainly very relieved and grateful that we have a budget in place now for FY21. We got within about 90 minutes of missing the deadline for that, which we never, in my 9 budgets I've been responsible for, this is the only one that kind of came down the wire like that. It was, I think, understandable that that we took up till the end of the fiscal year for this one, given the really unusual circumstances that has marked this whole budget process. This is a budget as you've heard me say many times before, dramatically impacted by the pandemic. And then in recent weeks, we made some very significant adjustments in response to the national and local demonstrations that followed George Floyd's murder, and that tried to make good on this opportunity for progress on racial equity and racial justice. And so I'd say those two issues really drove budget changes this year dramatically. I think this budget is, under the circumstances, a budget that is remarkably positive, remarkably good. It makes good on all the principles and goals we had for this budget going into this period. That doesn't mean we're gonna be able to do everything we want. In fact, we are gonna have to step back from many priorities, put some on hold for some time, because we we are expecting a large hit to our revenues to continue from this spring and early part of the summer into FY21. We are expecting something approaching $8 million, more than $8 million of revenue losses versus what we would normally have planned. And I think that, but despite that, we have a budget that doesn't have tax increases, even the tax increases that voters voted on in last March. It is a budget that keeps all city services essentially intact. People may notice some service levels of adjustment, but we aren't cutting back whole types of services anywhere. And it's a budget that leaves us in a strong position to respond to the pandemic, to keep making progress on the climate emergency, and to make real progress on racial justice issues. In terms of what happens next, first of all, a big issue continuing to loom over us, and a real, something we have some hopefulness about, is that Congress is currently considering another coronavirus relief package that, if it passes, I believe will have relief in it for municipalities like Burlington that have lost revenue. That would be a huge boost to our efforts here. That would take us out of this kind of austerity situation, allow us to resume, fill a whole bunch of vacancies within the city. It would allow us to restore service in certain areas. It would, mean that we don't need to bend down our reserves dramatically as we were planning on doing. So that's something to be watching for. If for anyone who has questions, concerns about the future of the city's finances and how that's going to play out in terms of services over the next year or two, this is an important bill that our federal delegation is fighting for right now. So that's one thing to watch. Certainly, we hope that the conservative revenue projections we have turn out to be more conservative than needed, that the economy continues to grow in strength and recover. We have seen, in part, we think these open streets programs the last couple of weekends, we've seen the largest groups, the most activity we've seen on Church Street since the pandemic began, the last couple of Saturdays with these open streets gatherings. And, and again, that's really leveraging what we know about the science, that we believe we can have this kind of economic activity and do it safely because of by having these activities outside, especially if people remain aware of good hygiene practices and physical distancing. So those are now, maybe your question too is also aimed at, there are two big new funds created by this, one for police, public safety transformation, and the other for racial equity and racial justice. And we want to move quickly on both of those fronts. And meetings have already begun with possible nonprofit partners about the possibility of increasing social services like the street outreach program or first call program as a way of kind of reallocating some of the community response from the police to other services, maybe to professionals who are more specifically, we're trained for mental health responses. So those conversations are already underway. I've committed to fast action there. Hope to have something to report there in the weeks ahead. By the same token, I've continued to have very good, productive conversations with the Racial Justice Alliance, and looking forward to being able to share more about those conversations and where we go from here. As you know, as I've said before, I'm committed to. I think one of the things that you kind of can't. This week has been another big week. Big major new reports out about the racial disparities in terms of who is getting infected and dying in America as a result of coronavirus. It is clear that racism is a public health emergency. I'm looking forward to very soon being able to come back and talk to you and others about what we're going to do about that here in Chittenden County.
I've got one other question.
Great.
So regarding the budget meeting,
Yeah.
We were tuned in. We know things were a little contentious. I guess that's a good word for it. And I know you had expressed some concerns about, some of the remarks that were made by counselors in that meeting. What was some of the discord at that meeting?
Well,
And Mayor,
yeah.
before you answer that question, I do just want to make you aware we have 5 other questions in the queue, so we should try to move through them as quickly as we can.
All right, thanks, Olivia. So the question here is, there was, the budget meeting was unusual. There was some tension in the budget meeting. I think Aaron's asking kind of to summarize what that was and maybe reactions to it. This was a challenging budget year for the reasons I described, and I think a lot of with the week of it being behind us, with the when some of those conversations were taking place, and I voiced some concerns, I did reach a moment that night. I was concerned that 2 counselors announced early on in the debate about the budget, or during the debate about a budget, that they would not be voting for it. So that is part of the reasons I said what I did. I wanted to make it very clear to people that the consequences of a no vote would be very significant and very dire. Had 6 counselors voted against the budget, we would have been in a fiscal crisis. We would have had the local version of a government shutdown. And 3 ultimately did vote no. I'm appreciative that 9 voted yes, and we have this budget in place. So some of the tension and concerns really were a function of that, and are now behind us, and I'm glad are behind us. Listen, I have a lot of respect for my colleagues on the council. I appreciate that new counselors have brought new perspective and new focus to a whole range of issues. I think that's been healthy, and it's good. And I think it's good for the community, good for the city. I do think there was some frustration that night about, I think we did get into some pretty fine-grained details. I've never seen us debate a $30 budget amendment before on a night when we had to make decisions about $200 million of spending for the upcoming year. I thought that was unfortunate. That was expressed by me and others that night. There's been some good conversation in the week since about how we work together going forward. I have a lot of optimism that we'll figure out a way to continue to work together and get things done for the people of Burlington. Okay. All right, great. All right, let's go to the other 5. Olivia.
Great. First up, we have Liz Murray. And Liz, you should be able to enable your microphone now.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Mayor Weinberger. Thank you very much for taking my question. My question has to do with a story that was published by the Vermont Cynic last week about one of about 30 students who was still on campus because they were unable to go home to their country during the summer because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And he and other students had this experience where their rooms were, they were experiencing dangerous heat conditions in their dorm rooms and having to sleep outside. And he was complaining to the administration and wasn't really receiving an answer. And after the Cynic story ran, he finally got an AC unit from the university. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts on this situation, or whether this casts any doubt in your mind that UVM will be able to handle students returning in the fall.
Thanks, Liz. I appreciate the question. At this point, I don't have any kind of firsthand information about these incidents exactly. I am looking into whether there was any engagement with city code enforcement. I haven't seen any indication that there was any. Students should be aware, you know, if they don't feel that the minimum housing standards that are required by ordinance are being met in an on-campus situation, they should feel like any resident of the city empowered to report that to code enforcement, and you know, if it's potential, we could be of assistance in a situation like that. It certainly sounds like a problematic situation. You know, I think in terms of comparing it and kind of making a broader assessment, does this mean that UVM, that we should have concerns about their sort of broader virus response this fall? I guess I'm not ready to make that leap from this story at this point. I do know that UVM is taking significant steps to plan for the fall. We're having a meeting with the state, the city, UVM, and Champlain College this week to kind of kick off our joint planning, coordinated planning for the fall. And I'm looking forward to that meeting. I know UVM has reported to us some months of work leading up to this. Certainly UVM has a big job for the fall, and we are going to all have a lot of work on our hands to get through that period and to find a way for classes to return and to keep the community safe. And so, you know, we are looking for UVM to play a big role in that. We're looking for them, certainly not just on campus, we're looking for them to take responsibility to help the city and the state ensure that students living off campus are complying with the governor's orders and not creating additional risks, undue risks. So this is certainly something we're watching. I think it's a separate, I think the fall preparations, you know, I think are not exactly the same, where there's been more time to plan for it and where there's a lot of resources going into getting that right. My hope is, you know, I think that's a different situation than some of the more ad hoc situations that, as a function of how quickly this came upon us, occurred this summer. So we'll keep you posted, Liz, as these conversations continue. I'm glad we have these conversations are starting with, you know, still significant time before the students arrive.
All right, thank you. I do have a second question very quickly.
Okay.
Obviously, the budget conversations, as Aaron pointed out, were very tense last week, and there were some changes made to the Burlington police budget, and you know, the number of officers before they can start hiring again was lower than what you had recommended, and so I wondered, there were some concerns that emergency staffing could be hit fairly quickly because morale is low within the police department. I wonder if you've heard anything about the current force numbers at the Burlington Police, or whether those have changed since the budget passed.
So, you know, I want to be clear that the budget changes that happened that night were very modest. There was one $9,000 change to the, you know, general fund budget over $60 million. So there was a reduction. There was a vote by the council to not replace officers until we drop from the current 91 officers down to 74. As there was some discussion that night, that in and of itself is not a change to the budget, and it's really not clear what, if any, change to the police department budget will result from that. Given that we don't know the rate of attrition, and it's unclear the degree to which greater attrition means we will incur greater overtime. As we were really clear with the council before that vote, and I stress this because I've seen this reported inaccurately a couple times. There was not a vote to cut the budget by 30%. There was only that vote to cut it by $9,000. Otherwise, the budget that I proposed, which did involve a more than 10% cut, was untouched by the budget action last week. In terms, I continue to have concern about that decision and about that vote. I don't think we have any immediate update on whether there's been any change in the number of officers. I have heard some, continued concerning reports about morale and the possibility of losing officers. From my perspective, this is a conversation that's going to have to continue in that I think we all hope, and including the police department, has expressed some optimism that some of the current load of the Burlington Police Department can be borne by other agencies, other nonprofits, other types of professionals. In particular, there's a lot of interest in responding to some mental health calls by social workers or some other type of professional, not police officers. We need to make progress on those conversations, and I'm going to do my part, as I mentioned in response to the Aaron conversation before. We got to move quickly on those. Certainly, I think it would be a real mistake if we got to the point where we were actually having to pull back from responsibilities that the community expects us to do, and these other capacities weren't there yet. And so I don't think anyone should think that the conversation essentially started last week by the votes of attrition. That's not the end of this conversation. We are going to have to keep talking about how we ensure that we fulfill our basic responsibility as city government, which is to keep the people of Burlington safe. And that's going to take more work and more conversation in the weeks ahead.
Thanks very much.
Our next question is from Ross from NBC5. Ross, you should be able to enable your microphone now.
All right, hi, thank you very much. My question is regarding the Everybody Loves the Parade mural. I know a few months ago, the city council had voted to move up the removal deadline to the end of this August. Was just curious if you had anything to share about how work on that might be coming along and what that might look like, because I know that the vote was to either cover it or remove it while a plan to figure out what to do with the space was figured out. That's a few weeks away now, that deadline, so I'm curious what that looks like.
Thanks, Ross. I don't have anything new to announce there yet today. It is something we're working on. We're aware of the deadlines. We're committed to, I support making that change, and we're gonna make sure we get it done within that time frame. When we have news to share about what we're gonna do, we'll be back to you. I don't have further details to share today.
All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Great.
Our next question is from Aiden Quigley. Aiden, you should be able to enable your microphone.
Hey, so you talked earlier a little bit about bars. I'm wondering if there are any specific incidences of concern this weekend, like there were, last weekend.
Yeah, to the best I can tell, things were better this weekend in the bars. We got far fewer complaints, and I think there was greater awareness. My anecdotal sense, I don't have hard data to back this up, but my anecdotal sense is that there was a higher level of compliance and greater awareness with the rules. And I think today's letter from the governor should continue that. The complaints we got this weekend were much more about really kind of surprising levels, much higher than normal levels of illegal fireworks being discharged, and concerns about the beaches. And that's part of why we spoke at some length earlier about the beaches. We put out a statement about this last Friday. We're hopeful things are calming down now that we're past the 4th of July, but I really do reiterate that discharging fireworks within the city limits, within an urban area like Burlington is dangerous. People may have seen the videos of the house that caught on fire in Brooklyn as a result of illegal fireworks discharges. It's also very disruptive to neighbors, where we really encourage people to knock it off. I mean, it's been too much of it. It's been way more than in a typical year, and we are trying to have the police respond to it, but there's limits to what the police can do on this front. And so I'm calling on Burlingtonians to get this under control.
And our last question is from Liam Elder Connors. Liam, go ahead.
Great.
Hi. So hopefully this first one will just be quick. I just was wondering, with that Champlain collaboration you're talking about, how much are the courses? You mentioned like the 20% off basically, but like how much are people actually going to be paying for these?
Yeah, Brian, are you still with us? Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I think Brian is here by phone. Brian, you should be able to speak now. Oh, you're still here. Great.
Still here. That's it. Thanks, Liam. And Melissa is also online, so if I get this wrong, she can correct me. Currently, Champlain charges about $318 per credit hour. The reduction would be another about 20%, which would take you down to about $265 per credit hour. Undergraduate certificates, that is like a 3 course load, so that's between about 16 to 18 credits. It varies by the certificate, and I think Champlain would have to speak more specifically to which, details of which program, but you're looking at a reduction of about 20% off that already pretty low rate of $318 per credit.
Okay, great. And then Mayor, just a question about the bars. What's the threshold or point where you would be closing them down? Like what are the things that you'd have to see happen that would make you shut them down again?
So Liam, I think what we're all worried about is if we're looking around the country, we're seeing what's going on, and we know that one of the things driving the spikes in the South and the West, by broad accounts, is transmission in bars. There's been documented super spreader events in bars. There have been cases of individual restaurants being responsible for more than 100 infections. So that's what we're concerned about. That's what we're worried about. I think a combination of greater evidence that we had community transmission happening in Burlington, in the area, is one thing we're really watching carefully. Right now, we don't have that. We are in the green, according to, again, referring back to COVID Act now. So the conditions that would make us nervous is an increase in the amount of general community transmission, and an indication that these rules that have been put in place are not being complied with on some ongoing basis, and that they're not working. So right now we don't have either of those two conditions, but from my perspective, that's what we're looking carefully at. And I hope we never get back to the point where we had to be during the shutdown of having to say, that these businesses have to close entirely. I think what the governor is trying to do, and that I support, is to find a way short of that for these businesses to continue to operate during the pandemic, especially during this part of the year where outdoor opportunity is available to us. But I think what's certainly on my mind is what's on my mind is one of the highest priorities that I think we need to have is getting schools reopened this fall. Is there are high value parts of the economy and parts of the society that we want to see operating, and what we may have to make decisions as we as we look to the fall. That is going to be our priority, I think, is having schools open, having these other parts of the economy, and if that comes into conflict with some of these other establishments, that's where you could see a need for further regulation.
Okay, I just want to kind of make sure I'm clear. So you're saying you'd want to see more community spread and or bars not following the rule.
Yeah, I think the two things we're looking there. Right. Yes, Liam. I think the two things that I'm looking closely at are what is the level of community transmission, and what is the rate of compliance with the governor's rules. I think increases in amount of community transmission, or a continued sense that there are frequent violations, both of those would be conditions that could result in further action on the part of the city or the state.
Great. And then just, I know that outdoor spaces are less, safer spaces to be in, and you've been getting a lot of complaints about beaches. I mean, do you think that some of it is tied to, when I've gone down to some of the beaches and seen large groups of people and that aren't practicing necessarily social distance, I wonder if people aren't necessarily worried about getting the virus, but the way that the mission place, are you concerned that speaks to a broader attitude of people not taking public health measures seriously, particularly younger people, potentially college students, and not following the public health measures in bars and whatnot?
Right. You broke up there for a moment, Liam. So I think I got it there at the end, but maybe could you just restate the question quickly, make sure I'm answering the question?
Yeah. I know that beaches, you're saying you're not as concerned about them as a transmission place, but if you're still seeing people there that are maybe not following all the public health guidelines as strictly, that might be worrying people that they're not following them broadly out in the community. And that might be where some of the concern is coming from. Yeah. And so I just would get your thoughts on that.
I think that's exactly right, Liam. I do think that there is a concern about whether younger Burlingtonians are complying with the governor's orders, and whether they're creating through their activities, they're increasing the risks for more vulnerable populations for the rest of the community. I think when you look across the country, and we know a characteristic of this second wave of infections in much of the country is being driven that a much higher rate of those infections have been in younger people. So I think it's a fair concern, and to a very real degree, as we've been talking about since the beginning of this pandemic, there is we're all in this together to a certain degree. The activities that I take have some impact on the health of the rest of the community, and so I think that's a fair concern. And it is really because of that concern, that this big coordinated effort is already started to think about the fall, when we do expect there to be a real likelihood of a higher level of community transmission. And it, speak out of exactly that concern, that one of the things that sort of I'm looking for in this partnership, in this coordination with UVM and Champlain College, is that that the colleges are taking responsibility for off-campus students. I think we need all of the tools kind of at our disposal, everything on the table as we trying to find a way to manage our way through this really unusual and challenging public health crisis. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that is driving some of these concerns. I think they're fair concerns. I'm concerned about it too. I'm thankful that right now we have very little community transmission. So we have not seen these, we have not seen spikes here in recent weeks, as we've been discussing, but that is by no means a guarantee that we won't in the coming weeks. And we will, so I think it's a legitimate concern, and we're focused on it, and it's going to be a big part of our virus response efforts between now and the fall.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is that it, Olivia? Did you say the last one?
Yes, that is what we have for today.
All right, thank you all. I know this we kept you here a long time today. Thank you for logging in. We are look for confirmation on this on Friday, but we are right now planning on a Friday briefing as well. We hope everyone has a good rest of the week, and we'll see you then. Take care.